Hello and welcome to another episode of the Digital Discipleship Podcast. My name is Henry and I am the Simple Systems guy. If you don't know me yet, let me go ahead and tell you something really important about me. I see systems in everything. If you take me out to eat, we go to my favorite restaurant, Chick-fil-A. You sit down with me for a meal, the first thing you're going to see is that I have a system for how I eat everything that I eat. I have a system for everything in my life. There's a system for how I work out. Everything to me boils down to putting in place a process and allowing that process to work. And while that may prove itself to be a little weird and awkward in some spaces, I found the space where it works. And it works right here, working with leaders just like you to help you build the systems that you need to lead your church or your organization forward. And so that's what I'm all about. I'm always thinking about how do we move people from point A to point B? How do we get them from where they are to where we believe God wants them to be through our ministry or through our business? And that's one of the huge values that I hope to add to you as we walk through together. And so today we're going to be talking about an exciting topic, digital discipleship. We're going to be talking about really what this is, looking down at it, and really just talking about more than just telling you how you can do discipleship digitally. I'm going to talk to you about the problems that digital discipleship can help you solve, because that's really what it boils down to, is that every time we're looking for a solution, we're looking for something that solves a problem. And the solution doesn't matter a whole lot if I'm not having the problem that you're offering. And so if you come and you're talking to me about, hey, you need to put some snow tires on your truck. You need to put some snow tires on your truck. You need to get these chains. You need to do all of these things. I'm telling you, these are the best tires in the world. And you can show me tons of receipts and tons of feedback and testimonials from people who say, hey, man, those snow tires are the best snow tires I've had in the world. You can show me a million people who say that. But guess what? I live in Birmingham, Alabama. If we get snow once a year, maybe those tires would be great. But for me, the solution doesn't answer or solve a problem that I have. And so what we're trying to look at is that if you're trying to figure out a digital discipleship, if that's something you need to consider in your church, then you need to know the problems that it solves. And so today we're going to take a moment and we're going to walk through that, and we're going to give you some really, really practical stuff to help you go. All right. So let's talk for a second, because maybe you don't know me, right? So I'm a consultant. So let's talk about how I got to this point, and just maybe give you a little bit of information on, like, man, why should I listen to this guy? What does he have to offer? Right. Well, three things. I'm just going to tell you about three parts of my life. I could talk all day about my life and my journey, but I'm just going to give you these three things. Number one, I was a church planter. I planted a church in Grambling, Louisiana back in 2010. And we started that church with me and my wife and 8 college students in the living room of our 3-bedroom apartment. Grambling is a small town, small city. And so we had a 3-bedroom apartment that was maybe about 1,000 square feet total. And we had one of the best apartments in the city. It's a very, very small town. But we planted a church there. And in that experience, with no money and nothing but us and a few college students, we were able to do some amazing things. We'd eventually grow that church to about 400 people. And we saw a ton of people come to Christ. We did a lot of great work in ministry. But I like to call that our backside of the mountain experience. We didn't have a lot, so I had to learn to do everything. We needed a website. I had to learn how to build it. We wanted to make videos. I had to learn how to edit. I had to learn how to work the sound system. I had to learn how to hook it up. I had to learn how to raise up leaders with no staff, with no money and no budget. How to empower volunteers who work with the time that they have. How do I do that? And we learned some great experience and some great things in our experience as a church planter. Also, I was a church revitalizer. I went to Huntsville, Alabama several years ago, and I went to work with a church planter to help revitalize an affluent church that had moved into an inner city community and was really trying to find their way. And I learned a lot in that situation. I learned a lot about multicultural ministry, because the church was a predominantly white church, and I am an African-American man. And so that was a unique experience. We were dealing with affluent members in a low income community. So I learned a lot about communicating and the things that we communicate with the words that we say or don't say. So I learned a lot about what it means to turn a vision around. I've also served as a part of a church that really needed to be revitalized. Came alongside the pastor and worked with him for about a year to help bring some new life into that ministry, and came up against traditions and people who have been around for a while, but whose skill set doesn't match where we need to go next. And so we wrestle with that, trying to move Sunday school teachers from the book that we've used for 30 years to a digital curriculum that people can take home and study wherever they go. That comes with video resources, all that kind of stuff. So that church revitalization gave us another set of experiences. And then finally, as a network leader, I've served as the executive director of a network of churches, about 45 churches here in the Southeast US, Puerto Rico, and India for the last 2 years. And so I've had a chance to work with leaders across many denominational lines. And one of the unique things about being a network leader is that when you lead a network, you tend to connect to people who lead networks. And so I've had a chance to work with several networks across the country. I have several large denominations who are a part and who work with our company as we speak, from Seventh-day Adventists to Baptists, National Baptists. We are even working with the Southern Baptist Church. We're working with some non-denominational, and we have even some more partnerships on the horizon. But all of those things came together. And when I looked at them, I said, man, this is overwhelming. It's if you're going to be a pastor and a church leader in this time, there are so many different things that you've got to be aware of. There's so many things that you've got to stay abreast of in order to do this well. And so as I thought about that, one of the things that I really said is, pastors need support. Pastors need somebody who can come alongside them and help them make this journey so that it's not just on them. Because I know the average church in America is less than 100 people. And when you're less than 100 people, in a lot of cases, if the senior leader doesn't do it, it won't get done. And so I really wanted to combat that. I really wanted to be a resource to pastors and say, hey, look, how can I come alongside you, do a lot of heavy lifting so that you don't have to? All right. One example of that, and then we'll jump into our training, is we created a resource earlier this year called Planning for 2022. And it's literally a strategic vision for the entire year. And in that strategic vision, what I did is that I laid out our blueprint for the whole year. We said, you know what, there are a couple of things that you need to be thinking about as you cast vision, because you need to empower people. So you need to be thinking about the people you want to reach, for example, the projects that you want to do, the processes you want to focus on, what are you going to be preaching, your preaching calendar this year, but then also for vision, how are you going to raise funds and develop generous givers in the church in a way that supports what you're trying to do. And so we put that resource together in the form of a PDF and a slideshow. And so what I've done is I've made it available to people. I've made it available to leaders, to pastors, to business owners, to say, hey, look, here's a template for if you lead a church. Here's a template if you lead a business. All you got to do is walk through this course where I'm teaching you what each section is, because you got to contextualize it to you. Now, at the very end of that course, here's the document. Take that document, go download it, go customize it to you, and make it work. Right. And so it's all about helping people like you take the next steps. All right. So let's jump in. Let's talk about discipleship. What really is the value of discipleship? Well, a couple of things. I want you to think about this, is that we now live in what we call the phygital world. Phygital is a blend between the words physical and digital, which means that the line between those two things is being blurred. The lines is being blurred. Like, this, like today, someone who watches online, who sits at home on their couch in their pajamas and turns on the live stream either on their phone or cast it to their TV, will leave that day saying, I went to church this weekend. Right? Think about that. Somebody who sat at home and watched the service online will use the verbiage, I went to church this weekend. Right? And so it's just an example, because in the past, when you say you went to church, that means you got up and you physically went to the building. But now in this digital world, the physical and the digital, the lines between those two are now being blurred and they are no longer mutually exclusive. And so as we navigate that, we have got to, as the church and as leaders, we've got to bring our strategies into that digital world. Because whether we like it or not, that's where people live now. People live in the digital world now. And so it doesn't matter if we like it, it doesn't matter if we agree with it. That's where people live. And because that's where people live, we've got to learn how to operate there, how to flow there, how to function there, and how to make sure that we bring everything we do into that space. And so now success has to look different. We can't now just look at success as how many people show up in the building. Now success has to include those people who engage with us digitally. And that includes people who may watch our service a month from now. That includes people who a message that you're preaching this weekend, who won't engage with it for 6 months. And at the right time, somehow they're going to find it. And still, they need to be able to find all the tools they need to connect and to take the next step. And so, as people of the kingdom, we know that our message never changes, but our methods do. Our methods from time to time need to change in order to help us take some next steps and get from where we are to where God is calling us to go. All right. So what is digital discipleship? When we talk about digital discipleship, it's built on this truth. The doors of the church are still open, but the doors are also digital now. And so when we do this and we think about digital discipleship, we're saying, how can we take our disciple making process and make it available to people who cannot physically be with us? Because I know there are a ton of differing views about how the church and how different people should respond to this pandemic. But here's the reality. Some people are not coming back for health reasons. They've got health stuff going on, and they have just made the conscious decision that, hey, look, we're going to take some time before we come back. Some people are not coming back because it's more convenient for them to be where they are. Their jobs have shifted. Their jobs have changed. They're now working virtually. And so now they're building their whole lives around that. And however we feel about that, I get it. I do think there is great value in physically being with one another, but we have to understand that. And so when we talk about digital discipleship, what we're saying is that we're creating a strategy for us to take our discipleship processes into the digital world. And so here's something for you to think about. If you're taking notes, it'd be a great thing to write down. Who will people become when they connect with your church? When they connect with your church or your ministry, your company, who will they become? And so here's what I'm asking you to think about, because you've got to put together your discipleship strategy. What I'm giving you is a framework and a toolkit, but you've got to put together your unique strategy. And so here's what three questions I want you to think about. What are the habits of a person who has been walking with you as a disciple? What are the beliefs of a person who is walking with you as a disciple? And what do they value? What are the values? What are the things that they value after they have been walking with you as a disciple? And so as you lay those things out and you answer those questions, you start to give yourself a framework for how this can operate and for how you can walk through the process of actually putting together a discipleship process for your church, right? So let's talk about this. Here's where you got to start. There are 4 problems that I believe we should be able to solve with digital discipleship, right? And when I say digital discipleship, keep in mind that these principles work in person as well. 4 problems to solve, and then I'm going to come back and give you solutions to those problems, all right? Number 1, wasted visits, right? I want you to think for a minute about the number of people who visit your church every week and no one ever connects to them. They visit the church every week. They watch online, they come in person, whatever it is. Every single week they visit and no one connects to them. Well, that's a problem. That's dropped fruit. That's God sending you the gift of a new person and they just go to waste because nobody connects with them. The second problem is shaky foundations. People are coming to you and they're looking for something solid. They need to be built up, man. And what you've got to ask is, how will you bring people spiritually up to speed with the depth of your church? Because if a new person walks in off the street and they're a brand new Christian, they don't know anything about the church, they're completely unchurched, they can't always connect with the things that you preach in the mass gathering because they don't have the foundation to understand. And so you've got to solve the problem of shaky foundations. Number three, you've got to solve the problem of inconsistent giving, right? And it's in this digital world, how will you develop systematic givers who partner to support the kingdom work? No matter what you do in life, it takes resources to do it. And in the church, our resources come from those people who benefit and who grow up out of what we do. And so you got to think about, how do you teach a person to give, because giving is a part of discipleship. And then last but not least, number four, the fourth problem is lack of volunteers. So many churches in America are wrestling with, how do we get more people to help us do what we're called to do, especially when you consider that the average church is under 100 people, right? And it's how do we get people who are already busy, who are living full lives, who have just come through a pandemic, how do we get them to discover their purpose and partner with us to make a difference in our world? So those are the four problems you want to address. All right. So let's talk about some solutions to those problems, because here's where we're going. I'm kind of putting together this little map here. But what I'm saying to you is that if you can build engaged disciples, you can lead an engaged church. I'm going to say that again. If you can build engaged disciples, you can build an engaged church. And engaged disciples are those people who are really actively involved in the work of the Lord as he has called us to it. And an engaged church reflects that. So let's talk about some simple solutions and some things that you can teach in your class to help you with this. All right. To solve the problem of wasted visits, I give you a tool called Reach and Keep. And so what you want to do is that you want to implement a strategy to number one, reach new people, right? To get them to come in where you can reach out to them and connect with them, but also to keep them by walking through a process that helps them take next steps forward. And so here we talk about two things. Number one, collect the data, which is where we talk about making sure that you have a way to get information from people every single time they show up to your service, but then also celebrating them by making sure that you're calling them, reaching out to them, and making a big deal of new people every time you can. All right. Number two, we talked about shaky foundations. So what can I do to overcome shaky foundations? Well, we use a strategy called build and field. And so you want to build by teaching people how to have a healthy devotional life, by teaching them how to walk with Jesus, by teaching them how to be a healthy, functioning believer. But then you want to fill in the blanks for them. You want to teach them the story. So as a part of your discipleship process, you want to have somewhere in there where you teach people the story of man's relationship with God. And so in our context and with the churches that we work with, we teach this and we set this up in a 4-part story where we walk people through the 4-part story of man's relationship with God. All right. Number three, for inconsistent giving, we use a strategy called teach and text. All right. So when we talk about this, two things you want to do. Number one, you want to teach people why we give. And that's something important to do during your discipleship process, to go ahead and do that on the front end, right? Don't just assume they'll pick it up along the way. Go ahead and deal with the elephant in the room, because sometimes that's one of the stigmas that people have about the church. We just want your money. We just want this. So go ahead and control that narrative by teaching people why we give, right? And not only do you need to teach them why we give, but you need to show them why we give. Show them what your church is doing that they get a part of. Show them the lives that you've impacted. Show them the work you're doing in the community. Show them the programs that you can offer. Show them all those things. That's teach. But then also text. And when I say text, you simply want to make giving easy. I know we're in a pandemic, but people shouldn't have to drive across town and drop off an envelope just to give to the church right now. You got to have online options. You need to have a text option. You need to have, as many a Cash App option, a Venmo, some kind of virtual digital option, right? All of those things are very real. And those are sources and tools that people use. Here's a good rule of thumb. Don't just think about what's most convenient for you as a church or as a bookkeeper or for your finance person. Think about what's most convenient for the people who are going to be giving. That's what makes the difference. What's most convenient for them? Because if somebody is already constantly using Cash App 4 or 5 times a day, to send money, that's what you need to use. If somebody uses PayPal, that's what you need to use. Have multiple options via teaching text, all right? And that's something that we coach you through in our programs. And then last but not least, we talk about lack of volunteers. And when we talk about lack of volunteers, we have a strategy that we use called catch and release. Two things you want to do. Number one, you want to catch. And the way you do that is through some kind of small group or community strategy. You want to make sure that you're encouraging and giving people an opportunity to engage in significant relationships with other people. If a new person comes to church and doesn't make at least 5 friends within the first several months or year, the chances of them slipping away are really, really high. You increase their chances of staying around and hanging around and sticking around if you help them build community. And so we use small groups for that. But then last but not least, we say release. And that's where we do something called gifts to going. And so we created a document that we give to all of our clients and our partners. And basically what it is that we take the different spiritual gifts and whatever format of spiritual gifts you use, we use APES testing, where you get the Ephesians 4 model. We use more traditional spiritual gifts, whatever it is. But we created a document. And that document says, okay, for this unique church, here are the gifts, and here are some spaces that we have where we need those gifts right now. Here's some spaces where those gifts connect. And so what you do is, as you walk people through understanding their gifts, you give them next steps by saying, since this is who you are, here is a place where you fit. Here is how you help us make a difference in the world. And I'm telling you, the light that comes on in people's head and their hearts when you connect their gifts that God gave you, say, God gave you this gift. Now we're going to release you to go in it. It makes all the difference in the world. And that's a huge part of the process that we walk through with our clients and with our partners. All right. So here is just a simple framework to help you think through this even more. All right. When you look at this chart at the very top, for those of you who are watching the video, we have worship gathering, and we're showing you this circular motion of a 4-part process: worship gathering, next steps, community groups, and serve teams. That's our 4-part kind of circle, if you would. Here's the idea is most people are going to discover the church through the worship gathering, but that should be the beginning of a process that they begin to walk on. And what I'm encouraging you to think about is, how will you tell people where to go next? Let me close you out with this story. We had a new couple just come to our church recently. And when they came to our church recently, I asked, had they been a part of a church and stuff like that? And they had. And they shared with me the heartbreaking story that they were a part of a church for 3 years. And they wanted to serve, and they wanted to do stuff, and they wanted to get involved. But they just could not figure out how to get involved. They'd ask people, they'd talk to people, they filled out cards, they'd done everything, but the process just wasn't clear. And so they had to choose between staying at this church where we really love the teaching and we really love the pastor and we really love the worship and we love all these different things, but we can't connect to people in ministry. They had to choose between staying there or leaving, resetting those relationships and going somewhere where they can be involved. And eventually God led them to come to our church, and we had not pursued them, but they had relationships already in the church. And they came over. And here's what's funny. Within 2 days of coming over, they had already found places to be active because the people they were connected with were already active. And so what I'm asking you to think about is, how will your church move people along that process of saying, okay, cool, you came to church, that's great. Now let's get you into this new members class or this new believers class. All right, now let's get you into a community group. All right, now let's get you serving so you can be active, because all those things are a part of discipleship. We worship together, that's discipleship. We learn the basics of the faith, that's discipleship. We walk in fellowship with other believers, that's discipleship. We serve, that's discipleship. And so what you've got to think about is, how will you move people on that journey? Listen, I hope that this episode was valuable to you. As always, if you want to connect with us and you want to see if our process is a great fit for you and your church or your company, all you've got to do is click the link down below and you can schedule a discovery call with me. I would love to chat with you, or you could chat with someone from our team. We'd love to chat with you and talk with you and see if we can be a part of what God is doing in you and doing it in your church. Listen, until I see you next time, keep the gears turning.